So, like I said, I didn't invite that many people because I didn't even think my grandpa was gonna come because he hasn't been talking to me for like the last week. But I'd like to start studying with him again, but he's not studying me right now. Um, Especially I'd like to do 2 times a day, but I got a lot of people are liking this quadrant stuff. Um, that's what my grandpa seems to be into. My grandpa says like, you think because you discovered a theory of everything that gives me special treatment. No, the only reason why I bring that up is because you keep on saying, once I become independent, then you'll study with me, or that you would do extra stuff or once I start doing it. So that's the only reason why I bring it up. If it wasn't for that, if you would be studying me 2 times a day or whatever, then I wouldn't even do this, you know. But whatever. Hopefully the quadrant stuff gets big. And I hopefully start teaching classes at some point. Can you hear me, Grandpa? Yeah. All right. So I'll do the talk now. I'm going to talk about quadrant theory. I'm just going to go through just certain topics. The main thing I want to talk about today is I'll just give you guys a comprehensive view of the way that you can apply this to the way that you perceive reality, the way you perceive the world. And I'm going to talk about the social world, actually. So I remember when I was in college, I learned about this model on the 4 races. It was in my sociology class. And the 4 races according to Omi and Wynant. It's a theory. And they said that there's in culture, our culture is divided among 4 races. The first one is the Asian race, which they said are outsiders, but they're superior. The second race they said is the white race, which is insiders and superior. The third race they said is the black race, which they said is insiders and an inferior. And this is the way that they're stereotypically perceived in society or in the world society. And then they have this, and originally they said there was only 3 races. But again, we are always going to see that phenomena where there's a 3, but then later a 4th is added. So originally Omi and Wynant just had 3 races, and they called it the triangulation of races in the world. But then later a 4th race was added, and they call it the racial positioning model. The racial position model. And then they added the 4th race, which is the brown race. And they say that that's the inferior outsider race. So the white race, the reason why the Asians are considered in this stereotypical model outsiders but superiors, because they're seen as weird because they're smart, so they're outsiders, but they're also seen as superior in that they work hard. And this is a stereotype. We're not saying that this is true. And of course, it's not going to always be true. There's different personalities. There's different individuals within every race. But this is a stereotypical viewpoint, that they are more first quadrant oriented. So I'm going to bring this up, is that they're first quadrant oriented, that the first quadrant is more mental. And that's stereotypically the Asian race. And if you want to look at it with the 4 elements, that would be the air race. It's kind of interesting, Asian air. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. I don't know if there's any coincidences in reality. So then we have the second race, according to Omi and Wynant's model, was a Caucasian. According to stereotypically, they're seen as, in the world culture, they're seen as insiders and superior. They're insiders in that they work hard, and they're superior in that they work hard, but they're insiders in that they're not super smart like the Asians. So because when people are very smart and abstract, they're seen as outsiders because they're a little bit weird. Okay, that's a little bit weird, that guy. He's his mind's everywhere. But the white race, stereotypically, they're more grounded. If you look at European culture, just the white race in general, they're more grounded. They're not as intellectual. They're more practical, pragmatic. And that's not really associated so much with intelligence. So even if you want to look at history, where did the white people get gunpowder from? They got it from the Asians. There was actually 4 main inventions that the Asians made. They call them the 4 main inventions. One was I think it was the compass. One was gunpowder. I'm gonna look it up really quick. 4 inventions, Asians. four great inventions were paper making, the compass, gunpowder, and printing. And the white race got the gunpowder from the Asians, and that's what gave the white race the dominance in society. Was the Rogers broke out. Was the dominance in society was the gunpowder. So we have the Caucasian races, the insiders, but there's came back, but they're insiders and superior. And then the third race, so they're not as intellectual as the Asians according to this model. Then the third race is the black race, and according to the racial positioning model, first established by Omi and Wynot, and I'm not just making this up. I learned about this in my sociology class, first year at UCSD. So, and we had to do a whole paper on this. So the third race, actually it was my second year at UCSD. So and I remember because I had discovered the quadrant model already before this. So when I was learning this, I was like, oh, this is another quadrant example. So the third race is the black race, and they said that they're insiders. Omi and Wynot, they say that they're insiders and inferior. They're insiders in that they, again, not like the Asians. The Asians are seen as very smart, intellectual, kind of weird. But the black race, they're seen as more like the white race. They're kind of grounded, cool, not thinking so deeply, just having fun, kind of. And then they're seen as inferior in that the white race is seen as superior, and the Asian race is seen as superior in that they both work hard. They're stereotypically, again, this isn't necessarily true. And in every race, there's going to be individuals. And we're going to get to that. There's personality types within every race. But I'm going to get to this idea, though, too, that within each race, there's going to be the personality types are going to be more directed toward these quadrants. So the Asian race is actually going to have more stereotypes directed toward the first quadrant, idealist type. Even within the Asian race, there's going to be more, for instance, even like an artisan Asian, they're going to be more first quadrant oriented. So they're going to be more often ISFPs. And that's from my research. And if they're a guardian, they're going to be more often ISFJs, so more first quadrant oriented. And you're going to have to look at my talks, the quadrant talks I already gave, in order to understand what I'm talking about the personality types. So then my mom just came in. Then we have, so insiders and inferior. So why inferior? Because stereotypically they don't work as hard, and but they're more cool, and that's just a stereotype. But again, is that biological or is that cultural? Maybe they don't work so hard because they don't want to be working for the man, because they were colonized and mistreated and grow up in ghettos, and that's an outcome of that. But regardless of the reasons don't matter. All that matters is that the quadrant's being revealed, that the quadrant is being elucidated. So then we have the fourth race, according to Omi and Wynot's racial positioning model, is the brown race. And they're stereotypically seen as outsiders and inferior. So the brown race is more seen as outsiders in that, again, like the Asian race, more intellectual, more mental. If you look at just like Hindu culture, very philosophical. You look at the Amerindian, American Indian, or Native American culture. A lot of people call it, there's different names for it now, depending on which. From what I heard, that the most politically correct way to say it now is Amerindian or American Indian. But there's different people have different ideas what's the most politically correct one to say. But I'll just say that one. So their culture was very, very intellectual, abstract as well. Like look at their mythology. It was, the coyote and the, very abstract. So yeah, they're outsiders, that they're kind of weird, intellectual, but then also inferior stereotypically, because the stereotypes, they don't work as hard. But again, do they not work as hard? I mean, obviously they do, but this is a racial, they do work hard, but this is a racial positioning model. This is the stereotypes of that they're lazy. Same thing with the black. So we have the four races, and these are going to be tied to the four personality types, as I said. So the first personality type is the idealist type. These are the NFs. And this is the first square, and the first square is conservative. My grandpa's an NF. And if you think about NFs, what they're about is, my grandpa's very much idealistic. Like, oh yeah, everything is the anti-entropic. We're in an anti-entropic reordering function, and everything's energy, and we got to work hard. And he's trying to get me to get a job, be independent and stuff. We got to work hard, and it's all energy, and you're very idealistic, like making you think like, oh yeah, but it tends to be that more often women are NFs. So my grandpa's an anomaly, and women tend to be more often, quote unquote, stereotypically spiritual, and my grandpa's very spiritual, and this is the personality type that's more associated with the Asian race, the more spiritual type. And even if you think about the Asian race, stereotypically very spiritual, kind of, Buddhist, Taoist, very spiritual, mental, more mental. Whereas where you get to the white race, which would be the guardian personality type, we're seeing more Christianity, which isn't as mental, but it's more grounded again, and it's more about belief. So you're gonna have to look at my videos, and you're gonna have to see what exactly I'm talking about the different quadrants. So the first quadrant is sensation, perception, response, awareness. This is more related to the Asian, more about awareness, sensation, perception, very spiritual, very mind oriented. Sensation, perception, very related to the mind, awareness, the mind. But then the second quadrant, which is the guardian quadrant, that's more belief, faith, behavior, belonging. This is the homeostatic quadrant. The second quadrant is always about order and organization. And we're going to see with there's 4 world religions. I learned about this in one of my teaching company courses. They say there's 4. The questionable 5th is Judaism, according to the professor who gave the course that I listened to. But he said that according to most sociologists, it's not a world religion, because a world religion has to proselytize, and it has to have like a large area of land. And Judaism doesn't proselytize, so it's not considered a world religion. So there's technically 4. The first square world religion, the first quadrant world religion would be Buddhism. And that's, again, related to the Asian race and the NF personality type, the spiritual personality type. And it's very conservative. If you think about it, this idea of let's let go of thoughts and let's just be pure awareness. Everything is energy. Everything is one. This is actually very conservative, a society like that. It's very grounded. It's static. And that's stereotypically what the Asian culture, Asian race is. And then we have the white race, the Caucasian, and then we have with that, it's the Christianity. And that's the second quadrant world religion. And this is more related to homeostasis. And this is belief, faith, behavior, and belonging. This is that orientation of order, organization. You have to have the right faith. But then at the same time, we're going to see throughout history, Christianity has always been, it kills anybody who kind of strays off the path. If there's any kind of heretic, any type of group that is thinking unorthodox, throughout history, the Christians will kill them, because Christianity is very homeostasis oriented. You have to have the right beliefs, faith, behavior, belonging. It's a homeostasis religion. And we're looking at the way that things manifest in reality, because that's all that matters. What matters is that the quadrant is the way that reality is expressing itself. And whether this is, somebody might say, and I definitely can imagine NF saying, because NFs tend to be like everything is one. And hey, don't stereotype. There's a lot of Christians who are not like that. It doesn't matter. I'm looking at the way that reality has manifested itself and the way that it expresses itself. So then we have Frank's joining in. What's up, Frank? All right, so then we have the third quadrant, race, and that is the black race, and that's stereotypically related to there's four world religions according to the sociologists, and that's related to the religion of Islam, and it's related to the artisan personality type. So the second quadrant was Christianity, the white race, and the guardian personality type. That's the organization personality type. And my mom, who's listening, is an SJ. She's that organization, and she's very antithetical to my ideas. She was very concerned about them, and she didn't want me to be believing anything different, because that's the way SJs are, very organization. And same thing with my dad. They're not known for thinking outside of the box. He's also an SJ. They're very, they want to stick to authority and what works. And same thing with my grandpa, who's an NF. The first quadrant and the second quadrant are very order-based, organization-based. These are the conservative quadrants. But now we're moving into the third quadrant, which is the black race. Now we're getting into a more quote unquote the destructive. The third race is always breaking out of order. Now we're becoming an individual. So in the quadrant model, this is a thinking, emotion, doing, dreaming. When you start to think, you're breaking out of beliefs. So now you're starting to do your own thing. You're breaking the rules. And that's what quote unquote black race is stereotypically associated with. And then, and again, these are stereotypes, but this is the way, this is a stereotype. So then and emotion and doing, they're more stereotypically associated with doing. So like Just Do It, Michael Jordan, he's a basketball player. And, you know, Biggie Smalls, and also dreaming. Biggie Smalls, it was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine. So this is a third quadrant. And this is the artisan quadrant. So artisans are SFs. And SFs are more sensory oriented. And again, they're not very mental, like the first square is always more mental. The third square is the most physical square. So according to the elements, the first quadrant is air. The second quadrant is water. That's the white race, the water race. Very homeostasis, nice. Third square is the earth square. This is the black race. And even if you look at it in terms of like the Asians, they kind of have like white skin like air. And then the white race, they're more like water. They have blue eyes like water. And even white water. And then and the black race is the earth. All right, we got Mark coming in. And another Mark coming in. All right, so yeah, I've gone through a lot of stuff. It's gonna be hard to understand coming in right now, but I'm gonna do my best to help catch up some of the people who came in right now. So now we have the third quadrant is Earth, and that's the black race, and it's thinking, emotion, doing, dreaming, and this is the artisan personality type. These are the doers. They're very into tools. They're very into doing things, and it's the more destructive one. So they're going to be more sexual. The NF race, remember, the NF square, the first quadrant, and the second quadrant, the guardian, they're more homeostasis. So especially the first quadrant, they're more related to women. So there's actually 4 genders, and they're going to be related to these 4 squares, 4 quadrants as well. And that the first gender is the woman, the female gender, and that's the first quadrant. And the first quadrant and the second quadrant, there's more women in those quadrants, this order quadrant. And especially the first quadrant, mental quadrant, very spiritual. That's why women tend to be seen as more spiritual. But again, not always. These are stereotypes, and there's going to be women who have personality types that are more third quadrant oriented and more fourth quadrant oriented. But there's going to be a higher percentage of women in the first quadrant. Even within the third quadrant, there's going to be ISFPs, so that would be the first quadrant of the third quadrant women. More women will be in that quadrant. So in the first quadrant orientation. So, but anyways, the third quadrant and fourth quadrant are more male, more doing oriented. So we have the feeling, these side is more feeling oriented. The first quadrant, second quadrant, the third quadrant, fourth quadrant is more doing oriented. And so the third quadrant, and according to race, is the black race. And they're more doing oriented. There's 4 races according to the racial positioning model, and it's related to the religion of Islam. So Islam is about doing. Remember, the second quadrant was belief, faith, behavior, belonging. That's Christianity. Christianity is mainly about what you believe. You just have to believe the right thing and you're saved. Stereotypically, that's the way that Christianity is. But it's still very homeostasis. I described that they really enforce belief. And you look at the Crusades and you look at the Inquisition. It's not like they're very order oriented. But then the third quadrant, the Islam quadrant, is more doing oriented. They focus more on you have to do the rituals, you have to do the Hajj, you have to do the prayers, you have to do the washing, you have to. So it's very much more related to doing, and it's also more related to thinking. So again, in the quadrant model, we have sensation, perception, response, awareness. That's the Asians, and that's Buddhism, and that's more mental. But then the second quadrant is belief, faith, behavior, belonging, and that's Christianity. That's the white race, and that's more That's more homeostasis. But then the third one is thinking, emotion, doing, dreaming. This is a black race, and this is Islam. Now, if you think about Islam, they're very thinking oriented. If you look at them, why I characterize them as thinking oriented is because they're questioning the belief system of the Christians. And they study a lot. They study the Christianity and they study all this so that they can argue with them. And they say, okay, they study the scriptures and they say, no, look, see Jesus here, this is wrong. And according to the Gnostic gospel of Barnabas, actually Jesus isn't God. And then they go through all this stuff and they're very thinking oriented and they're questioning. So now we're moving out of order, the second quadrant, and we're moving into thinking. And if you think about it, stereotypically, a lot of black people go into Islam. And maybe a part of that is because they're trying to break free of the white culture that they feel has oppressed them. But again, the reasons don't matter. What matters is we're seeing the manifestation of the quadrant throughout reality. So they're thinking and it's so thinking, emotion, doing, and dreaming. This is stereotypical Islam. And then there's that fourth race according to the racial positioning model that I learned about in my sociology class at UCSD, and that's the brown race. And this is the fourth quadrant, the transcendent quadrant. The fourth is always transcendent, and that is contemplation, passion, flowing, and knowing. And if you want to think about, okay, there's a four world religions according to the sociology professor on the teaching company course I listened to. And he's saying that the fourth world religion is Hinduism. But again, Hinduism, that's the different one, because some people even say it's not even a religion, but according to him, it is a religion. But they say it's more of a philosophy. So the fourth is always transcendent, but that makes sense. It is a philosophy. And the reason why I emphasize that is because that's a nation of contemplation, passion, flowing, and knowing. It's more mental again. Remember, in the Omi and Wynot model, the brown race is more abstract, which is more mental, thinking oriented. Or the brown race is more outsiders in that they're more mental, they're more abstract thinking, so they're seen as weird, but then they're inferior. So this is the idea of contemplation, passion, flowing, knowing. If you look at the religions of the brown people, quote unquote, would be in Hinduism, we're seeing a lot of philosophy. They're talking about, Vedanta. There is no self, there is no thing. But then at the same time, if you want to look at it, it's all about relationships. Quadrant model is all about relationships between different aspects. So between the quadrants. So Hinduism often is seen as bad because think about it, they have stuff like Karma Sutra, where they're kind of, that's related to knowing. Knowing is sex. If you look at my lecture on the quadrant model, knowledge is related to sex. And they have Karma Sutra where they have whole rituals that are built around sex. You're not going to see that in Christianity. You're not going to see that in Buddhism. And you're not going to see it in Islam either. But you're definitely going to see, you see it a lot more in Hinduism because we're getting into that transcendent, the death. We're getting into the death quadrant. And if you want to think about it in terms of the, in terms of the four seasons, we have spring, which would be the Buddhist Asians, then summer, which is the white race of Christians, then the Islam would be fall, which is the destructive one. Islam, and again, this is stereotypes, but Islam is characterized as more destructive, more related to terrorism, quote unquote. Now, that's a stereotype, but the quadrant model is just about, the quadrant model is very stereotypical. That's the way that reality is expressing itself. So the third quadrant is this orientation, and then the fourth quadrant we have winter, which is death, and that's the Hinduism, that's the brown race. And then now let's look at according to the Nolan chart. This is the chart of that talks about the different economic orientations. And the Nolan chart describes that there's four economic orientations. The first one is communism. Communism is according to the Nolan chart, it allows personal freedom, but it doesn't allow economic freedom. And this is related to the Asian race, and it's related to the NF personality type. So my grandpa again is an NF, and his ideas are kind of a little bit communistic, and you'll see it even more women. Again, remember I said that the first two quadrants are more women oriented, the second two quadrants are more men oriented. Again, there's going to be men in the first quadrant, there's going to be women in the third quadrant, but the stereotype is that. So the communist orientation is more related to Asians. And if you look at throughout history, Asian people have more often been communists. So you look at the like China, uh, the Vietnam, and even Russia is kind of in Asia. So we're seeing more of that orientation, that economic orientation in this first quadrant orientation, and that's allowing personal freedom, but not allowing economic freedom. So again, it's actually kind of more mental, not allowing economic freedom. That's not related to doing. The first quadrant is always opposite of the third quadrant. And again, communism actually, a lot of people are going to find this interesting, but communism is related to it is conservative, because, and I was saying that's the NF orientation is a conservative orientation because it's idealist, like, oh, we're all one, let's all get along, and but at the same time, if you're not in that believing everything's one and let's all get along, and if you're going out of order, the communists are going to kill you, and that's the way that communism has expressed itself. So that's the first quadrant. Then the second quadrant we have, according to the Nolan chart, we have the fascist orientation, which is they don't allow personal freedom and they don't allow economic freedom, and that's stereotypically the white race. So if you look at the cultures that have adopted that, would be like Germany with the Nazis, where you're not allowed to have personal freedom, so they don't allow homosexuality or a lot of freedom for women, and it's actually the more religious orientation. So if you look at there's four domains of knowledge, four main domains of knowledge according to Wilbur. The first domain is science. The second domain is religion. Religion will be related to the white race. Science would be related to the Asian race, because science is more mental again. And also, if you think about it, physics, it's always related to spirituality. And again, the first square is more spiritual, like quantum mechanics. They relate that to spirituality nowadays. And it's actually a myth that science is objective. It's very subjective. And then the third domain would be art, which would be more related to the black race. And then the fourth domain would be philosophy, which is more related to the brown race, more philosophical orientation like Hinduism. But anyways, back to the Nolan chart, the four economic orientations, we have fascism, which is the second quadrant, and that's more related to the white race, like the Germans, in that it's very rigid, and it's religion, or like religions tend to be fascistic. And so we're not allowing personal freedom. The women have to cover themselves up, and there can't be any homosexuality, because probably people could argue what's the reason? Maybe genetic Darwinism. Maybe they want to protect the genes of their race. If you look at it, if you want to look at the genetic Darwinian perspective, the Asian race and the white race are, if you want to look at it through historical biology, those two races came from Africa. One group left Africa, and then they spread throughout the whole world. And everybody outside of Africa is very, in terms of genetics, they're very homogenous. So maybe that's why the white race would be more fascistic, because they want to maintain the homogeneity of their genes more often, or even the Asian race. But whereas the black race, there's a lot more genetic diversity within the black race, and the brown race kind of there's also a lot of homogeneity within the brown race, but that could also explain why there's conflict between these different quadrants in the races, if you want to look at it through a biological perspective. But back to the fascistic one, we have the Asians tend to be maybe more accepting of homosexuality in this model, and more accepting of freedom for women. Not necessarily, but kind of true. But the fascists, that's a communist. They allow personal freedom. But in the Nolan chart, in the fascistic square, the second quadrant, they don't allow personal freedom. So no women have to be subjugated, and homosexuals. And then at the same time, there's no economic freedom either. So we have to all share. So if you want to look at it through a genetic Darwinian perspective, you want to share more if you're the white race, because your fellow people share your same genes, and it's more rigid. Then we have the third quadrant Nolan chart, would be, according to the Nolan chart, it's the capitalistic orientation of economics. And this would be more associated with the black race and Islam. So Christianity would be the second quadrant. The first one is Buddhist. This third one is capitalism, and this doesn't allow personal freedom, but allows economic freedom. So again, it's all stereotypes, but we see this kind of manifest in reality where the stereotype of black people, just like look at the music videos of the rappers and stuff. It's, hey, let's get the money, let's get the nice cars, let's get the bling, let's do all that. But hey, homosexuals, yo, screw that. That's all that gay stuff. No, I don't like that. And women, like let's subjugate the women. Like women are hoes, they're bitches, you know. This is a stereotype. So not allowing personal freedom, homosexuality, all that stuff. Ew, that, yo, we're men. Remember, the third quadrant and the fourth quadrant is the male quadrants. The first quadrant and the second quadrant more feminine, especially the first quadrant is very feminine. The fourth quadrant is extremely masculine, extremely. But then the second quadrant is a little bit more feminine, but it also has more masculine in it. The third quadrant is a little bit feminine. It has more actually the second quadrant is kind of even with feminine and masculine. The third quadrant is a little bit more masculine, but the fourth quadrant is extremely masculine. The first quadrant is extremely feminine. So in the third quadrant orientation, this is capitalist. They're doing okay, let's do all the economic freedom, let's make that money. We don't want to be communist. Communist, that's the women. That's women orientation. That's sharing. That's conservative. That's that, oh, let's all share, let's all get along, let's cooperate. Ooh. That's that spiritual hippie stuff. That's that hippie stuff. That's the NFs. We're the SPs. The SPs are cool. The SPs don't care about all that sissy stuff. And then we have the second quadrant is more the SJs, who are more homeostasis, so they're more rigid. But the SPs, now we're doing stuff. Let's get that money. Let's do that economic freedom. They're the athletes. You know, like my grandpa, he's more of an NF. He's not very much of an athlete, but he likes watching the athletes. He says it brings tears to his eyes because he couldn't do that stuff. But like when I would watch the athletes, I'd be like, I could do that, whatever. But I'm the NT. I'm the fourth quadrant orientation. So that's the philosophical orientation. That's the knowing orientation. But the third one's the doing orientation. The third quadrant's doing, thinking, emotion, doing, dreaming. So that's all about doing. So, but no personal freedom, but economic freedom. The fourth orientation is libertarian, according to the Nolan chart. And they allow personal freedom and they allow economic freedom. So this is, okay, this is like Hinduism. This is like the brown race, where they're like, yeah, whatever, you know, we could let the women, Karma Sutra, women can do that stuff. And homosexuality, we'll even make gods. There's cross-dressing gods in Hinduism. Like Arjuna is a cross-dresser. And so like Hinduism is allowing a little bit more, but still religions are always second quadrants. So they're always going to be more rigid. But stereotypically, this is more the fourth quadrant, more the death orientation, breaking free. So this is the brown race. Okay, let's allow personal freedom and let's allow economic freedom. So that's that libertarian orientation. And if you think about like famous libertarians, a lot of them, I'm thinking of I can't remember their names right now, but a few of them that I'm thinking of are of the brown race. So this is kind of the way that you look at reality through the quadrant model. I'm just kind of giving you guys a way of looking at it through this. So these are all stereotypical, but through stereotypes there's a kernel of truth. And I think that reality does express itself through this kind of patterning, through this quadrant pattern. And if you really want to get deep into it, you would have to go through the idea that reality really does. So I'm talking about physics. So there's four main domains of science. Physics is the weird spiritual one, the first quadrant. Chemistry is the order one, the second. Biology is the third one, the one that's more related to doing, and it's bad, like evolution. That stuff is bad. But physics, everyone's like, oh, physics is so good. The first quadrant's always seen as good. The first two quadrants are always seen as good. The second two quadrants are always seen as bad because the first two quadrants are feminine. The second two quadrants are masculine.